So one of the issues that is coming into greater focus and is becoming more of a factor in everything that's going on with the potential agreement or memorandum of understanding, negotiations with the Iranians is the elections that are coming up, the midterm elections in the United States and the elections in Israel. And I want to get into both of those issues in this video. For the American side, we're going to do that first. I'm going to play you a clip of General Jack Keane just giving an assessment of where we are in this whole thing. I'm going to interject at a few points and just share some thoughts. A few of them I've shared in other videos. I pretty much agree with everything he said, but I want you to pay close attention to what he says about the impact of the upcoming midterms. And then we're going to play a clip of Tamir Morag, one of the top political commentators in Israel. He usually speaks in Hebrew on Channel 14 cable news here, but he was interviewed in English. And he was specifically asked about what's going on now with the Iran situation, and really the whole situation in the Middle East and the impact of the upcoming Israeli election. So that's going to be the topic of this video. Let's go ahead and check out General Jack Keane on Fox News just the other day.
Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. How do you assess this most recent reaction from the United States?
Well, that's the appropriate reaction, certainly. I mean, here's the Iranians supposedly sitting down at the table to negotiate, removing the controls over the Straits of Hormuz and trying to make a deal so that we're not going to re-attack them, an option that I preferred, certainly to finish off Iran and weaken them so that there would be an economic collapse, and hopefully the Iranian people will be able to deal with that. But that's not where we are. Let's deal with where we are. The Iranians once again showing their hands here. I mean, what they were doing is laying mines in a place where they had already laid some mines, and they were thickening that capability to deny that lane to obviously transit capability of the oil tankers. And as soon as that operation began, our guys had enough sense of what was really taking place. We interfered with it. They fired at us, and then we went after the source of where those missiles came from, those SAM missiles came from in the vicinity of Bandar Abbas. The CENTCOM commander has the full authority to react defensively. He doesn't have to ask permission. That's what was done. He had the full support of his chain of command, the Secretary of War and the President of the United States, to do that. But I think...
Okay, we have to pause there and talk about what actually happened. The way he's talking about the strikes that were reported yesterday, they had actually happened the evening before, where the United States said that they were doing defensive strikes because the Iranians were laying more mines in the Straits of Hormuz, and that they also struck missile launch sites. Okay, that's what it said. And he mentions Bandar Abbas. In American media, the only location mentioned was Bandar Abbas. But as I showed in a video, if you follow my channel, I did a video on this yesterday where I showed that in the Arab media, they were more specific about locations that were hit. We looked at an Emirati news source that mentioned 3 different locations. These were mentioned in a few of the Middle Eastern media, that there were 3 locations on land that were hit, well, on the mainland of Iran that were hit. And then in Turkish media, it also mentioned another site. Let me show this to you on a map so we're very clear about what actually happened here. So according to United Arab Emirates media, there were 3 sites that were struck by the United States in these quote-unquote defensive attacks yesterday. Okay, this is the Strait of Hormuz, right? And Bandar Abbas is right here. Okay, so, and that's what Jack Keane just mentioned, that we struck some missile launch sites in Bandar Abbas. But in the Arab media, we also saw there were 2 other locations that the United States struck. One of them was Sirik, right here. Okay, here's Sirik. This is Sirik. Okay, and the other was Jask, all the way down here. And Jask is particularly interesting because it's outside the Strait of Hormuz, meaning if you're in this area, you're already outside the Strait of Hormuz, you're outside the blockade. This is not the Strait of Hormuz anymore. I mean, you're not outside the blockade to Iranian ports. There are a few Iranian ports along here, but they struck Jask. The point is that if a ship is here, they're already outside the Strait of Hormuz. And I pointed out that these locations, so those are the 3 on-land locations. Let's talk about them first. just very briefly. If you saw the other video, this is a bit of repetition. But Bandar al-Jask, this is a port. This is a site that's directly across from Fujairah. It's pretty much as close as you can get to Fujairah. Now, what's Fujairah? Fujairah is a port that the Emirates built. So the United Arab Emirates, here's Dubai, right? This is the United Arab Emirates. They're here. And they have, the tip of this belongs to Oman, but Fujairah is part of the United Arab Emirates. And there's also a port here called Khor Fakkan, these two ports. They are on the receiving end of a pipeline that the Emirates built from their oil fields, which are down here, out to here. And it's not a very long pipeline. The purpose of the pipeline is to move the oil to a site where they can load up tankers and not have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So just in case there was ever any disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, they would have a workaround. And Jask is directly across from that. And let's keep in mind that the Iranians have been threatening this whole time. Remember, they don't have a navy anymore. It's been destroyed, but they've been threatening the whole time. The way they keep the straits closed and the leverage that they're holding over the Americans, or the threats that they're making, is that if there's any return to kinetic action, they're going to target all of the energy assets, the oil assets, and desalination plants that belong to the Gulf states. So this is directly across from the Fujairah port, which is how the Emirates are bypassing the closing of the Strait of Hormuz and getting their oil out. Of course, the Emirates have been attacked more than any other country, even way more than Israel during the course of this war by Iran. And the United States just took out missile launchers in Jask, which is, that's where they would be. The purpose of those missile launching sites would be to attack the Emirates, the Fujairah port here, and maybe also ships coming out of the strait. Erick is as close as you can get to, it's one of the narrowest points of the Strait of Hormuz also. Erick is right here where you have this spot. And then you have Bandar Abbas. And also in Turkish media, it was reported that there were explosions there were explosions reported just south of the island of Larak. That's this island right here. So you see where Larak is. From Larak to the tip of Oman here, this is the narrowest point in the entire Strait of Hormuz. So I don't buy this story that this was all self-defense, that this was all defensive. I think what the Americans were doing, it could have also been defensive. It could be that they saw the mines being laid and wanted to deal with it. But by taking out missile launch sites in Jask, Erick, and Bandar Abbas and Larak, they're sending a message to the Iranians that they are dealing with the threat that's keeping the straits closed. Because what does it mean that the Straits of Hormuz are closed? What it means is that there are missile launch sites along this coastline here that threaten the ships going through and threaten the assets of Oman, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia on the other side of the strait. So I think this was the Americans showing the Iranians that they are determined to get the strait opened. It wasn't just about self-defense. Let's get back to General Keane.
The lesson here is, where are the Iranians? And I think in going forward here, Maria, we've got to be clear-eyed about who we're dealing with. Let's put in the rearview mirror all the other options. We're on a path here to get a negotiated settlement. So how do we get at that and do that as best we possibly can? One, we have to recognize that Iran is going to feel emboldened. They believe they got the United States, the world's #1 superpower, to back down here. And we're going into negotiation phase. They know they were hurt seriously by the 37 days of military operations, and they were trying to avoid any more of that. So that has been accomplished. And being emboldened, how does that translate? Here's number one. What they will try to do is, certainly the Straits of Hormuz will likely be open, but they want to maintain control over that. They want to have sovereignty over it. They're claiming that Oman and Iran, these are territorial waters, and therefore they have a right to it. They're ignoring that the UAE also borders the straits. And that's not, there's no legal basis for that. International law recognizes this as international waterways, and we've got to hold to that. They have now said, well, we're not going to charge transit fees. We'll charge protection fees. Protection from what? Protection from Iranian attack. Doesn't that sound like an organized crime deal that we used to face in this country? That's what these guys are truly about. So what do we have to do here? We have to make certain, and we have leverage here. Our leverage is the economic blockade. We have to make certain that they make public declarations and written statements in the agreement that they are going to respect and are committed to international trafficking through the straits, and there's a legal basis for that. And we cannot have them holding a geopolitical influence over the region. The major achievement Iran will see in everything that's taken place since hostilities broke out is the fact that they took control of the Straits of Hormuz, and they believe they will have influence over our Gulf state allies and partners in the region going forward. We didn't take it away from them physically. We have to take it away from them publicly in terms of the deal we make.
Okay, this is so important because when you read Iranian state media throughout much of this war, ever since they closed the Strait of Hormuz and they started weaponizing it, they're just talking about it nonstop about how this is their strategy and the strategy is working. And let's also say, when the war began and Trump spoke the night that the war began, and he laid out the objectives of the war to destroy their navy, to destroy their nuclear capabilities, to destroy the ballistic capabilities, to make sure that they never fund terrorist proxies ever again. And then he also talked about that, the liberation of the Iranian people as a possibility of what's going on. No one ever talked about the Strait of Hormuz the day that this whole thing started. The Iranians are very proud of themselves that they successfully shifted the focus of this war to the Strait of Hormuz. It's like, you're chasing some criminal because, for whatever reason, and then he grabs a hostage and holds a knife to the hostage's throat. And now suddenly what you're chasing the criminal about is not what this confrontation is anymore. And your primary goal is to get him to drop the knife and let the hostage go. They've successfully made this about the Straits of Hormuz. And that's, he's got it exactly right here.
Second thing they're going to do is string these negotiations out. We've given them 60 days. They'll probably take as much of that as possible. Yes, they'll say we want to make a deal, but at the same time, when you get down to the details, they're going to fight us over those details. They believe that the leverage that the United States has is certainly a real one. We have leverage over their money. They want their frozen assets released. They want sanctions removed. We have got to use that as leverage. The other leverage was saying, well, we'll reattack if you don't do that. I think where they are, they don't take it seriously because they'll stretch this thing out. The closer we get to the midterms, they believe the less likely the United States would ever attack them. So the real leverage here is money. And we've got to use that money to help get the best deal we possibly can. We can't give in to their negotiations. They're going to want some good faith on our part. Okay, release some billions of dollars to us. I think the Qataris were talking about, because they have control of some frozen assets, some $6 billion. That'd be a mistake. We cannot throw that kind of a lifeline to the regime before we get down to the nitty-gritty of the deal, which is what? Nuclear weapons, support for proxies, and ballistic missiles. And those are the things they're going to try to drag out here as much as they possibly can.
So let me just drill down on this point. This is so critical. First of all, there are reports. It seems likely that the Qataris are giving them some financial relief. The foreign minister of Iran was in Qatar yesterday, trying to get the Qataris to unfreeze the Iranian assets that are there. This is a very dangerous situation because we know the Qataris do not want the regime to fall, and they could be double-crossing us and giving financial relief to the regime. Also, he's exactly correct that what the regime wants the most right now, their number one priority, is the money. I showed this in a video I made a couple of days ago, where you see that in Iranian state media, when they're talking about this potential deal, this potential memorandum of understanding, all they're talking about, there were like 4 stories in one day that were all talking about the sanctions relief and the cash and getting some money, and this has to happen first, and it's the top priority. They are panicking. It shows that they're really strapped for cash, and they want it to be, billions of dollars up front in order for this to work. And he's absolutely right. That has to be leveraged. But notice what he said there about the midterms. They think that the closer they get to the midterms, the less likely President Trump will be to want to go back to kinetic action. And There's a lot of logic to that.
So, General,
Yes.
I mean,
we still have some leverage points here to use.
You think that we're just going to continue to grind them down and just use the economic power and the economic warfare and the money to continue to weaken them until they just submit?
I don't believe they're going to submit, to be frank, given you posited the question. I think where they're at right now, they know they have serious issues based on the 37-day war that we conducted against them. But the regime is intact. The hardliners are in control. They're all about recovery now, and they want to. I'm sure inside their circles they haven't changed their goals one bit. They still want to be a nuclear power at some point. They're going to deny they're interested in it. They want to try to recover their ballistic missile programs. Certainly, they were doing all of that over the last 6 weeks of the ceasefire, and they were continuing to support the proxies financially over the last 6 weeks. So that they're going to attempt to return to all of that. We got to put together a deal that stops them from doing that. The leverage of reattack, I don't think, is anywhere near as strong as it once was. So what is our leverage then? Initially, what I said over the Straits of Hormuz to get our right answer is the blockade. Then it's also going forward is the financing and the recovery. They can't recover without some additional financing. Once the straits are open, obviously their oil, people are buying it. The Chinese are going to go back to buying 90% of it. That's a revenue source that we can't stop. But the other things that we can, in terms of getting them flush with billions of dollars, we're not going to make the mistake that the Obama administration did. I mean, that's absurd, giving them billions of dollars up front and just sign a good faith. President Trump is not going to make a bad deal here. He's our backstop. So we got to be tough about it. We don't have as strong a leverage, and we got to be honest with ourselves about that. But we still have leverage here, and we've got to use it.
Well, it sounds like the war is very much still on, and if we're not expecting them to submit and to give in here, we just have to keep grinding them down.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And listen, they are, you talk about an art form, their art of negotiations is solid. I mean, they drag out negotiations. They promise, and then when they get down to the details, they fight us over the details, and they drag out negotiations. And we keep going around in circles. We've been talking about the same issues, as we all know, Maria, for months. And this circular piece we're involved in here this is the objective of what the Iranians want to do. They want to drag this thing out as close to the midterms as possible. Look, at the 60 days gets us to where? Late July. And that's about less than 90 days to the midterms then. They believe that the likelihood of any reattack taking place at that point is pretty slim. And they figure the longer they can drag out negotiations, they can wear us down in that negotiation process. However, that is not going to happen. The president's committed to this diplomatic path versus the military path. But at the end of the day, despite the length of the negotiations, he is not going to make a deal that's going to compromise the United States' interest in the region or that of our allies.
I mean, the question that many people keep asking, General, is will President Trump finish the job?
Well, he passed up the opportunity to do it militarily. He's trying to achieve that diplomatically now. He can't do that without cooperation with the Iranians. I think at the end of the day, where the Iranians would like to have this is they negotiate as long as they possibly can, even past the 60, 90 days. And even if they do come to an agreement, they're not going to fulfill that agreement, particularly in the next administration.
All right. Look, this is everything I've been saying for weeks and weeks. But you see, the issue of the midterms, I'm not as optimistic as him about the time. Like he says that the Iranians are banking on the fact that there's less chance of kinetic action as they get closer to the midterm, and that they're wrong because Trump isn't going to take a bad deal. Listen, the Iranians aren't sure they're going to win this, but they know that this is their best shot. Their best shot is to get closer and closer. They know that it's squeezing Trump. They know that Trump is going to be more eager to make a deal, and that it means that he will compromise on this point or that point in order to make a deal. He might allow them some sanctions relief on the sale of oil, because that also helps bring down oil prices, which is the main domestic issue that he feels that he has. So the proximity of the midterms is becoming a bigger and bigger factor. Now, I want to play this clip. I want to go over to the Israeli election issue. So this is a clip from Israel Update, which is put out by Tablet. It's sponsored by Tablet Magazine, and it's hosted by Gadi Taub and Michael Duran. Michael Duran is with the Hudson Institute. He's one of the best Middle East experts out there. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's fantastic. Gadi Taub is a very important academic and public intellectual here in Israel on the right. And they do this pretty much weekly, called Israel Update. Fantastic podcast. And they had Tamir Morag as their guest. Tamir Morag is a political commentator for Channel 14 News in Israel, and he rarely ever speaks. I mean, he generally does his commentary in Hebrew, but he does speak English, and they had him on as a guest. And in this one segment here, well, I'll let you watch it for yourself.
Sure. But Tamir, can you say something about how you see this influencing the Israeli scene, the internal domestic Israeli scene, politics?
It can be a very problematic event for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He has expressed the notion and promised the idea of total victory. Now, it's true that he never promised total victory over Iran or over Hezbollah. He has promised total victory only against Hamas in Gaza. But first of all, you still don't have total victory over Hamas in Gaza. Second of all, facts doesn't really matter when you go to elections. The notion in the public opinion is that Netanyahu promised total victory against Iran and against Hezbollah as well, and still hasn't delivered. And I can tell you from conversations that I had the past 24 hours or 48 hours with senior figures in Netanyahu's circle, that there is some concern, not only for Israel's national security about this emerging agreement, perhaps between Iran and the US, but also about possible political consequences as we are getting closer and closer to the elections. I think that Netanyahu won't do anything active in order to sabotage the negotiations between Iran and the US. By the way, this is the reason he hasn't given a green light up until now to attack in Beirut, in the Dahia, in Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut, even though Hezbollah is escalating its war against Israel every day. He's concerned that the Iranians will use it as an excuse to withdraw from the negotiations, and that the US will accuse Israel of sabotaging the best chance to end the war. But I can tell you that he is very much politically and not only diplomatically concerned from what's going on, because if it's going to end with a partial agreement with Iran, with the regime on its feet, and with the notion of victory by Iran, even if the facts show otherwise, it's going to be a problematic event for Netanyahu.
So this is an aspect of the war that we have not talked about enough, which is the upcoming Israeli election. And here you get an insider's look. This is really one of the top political commentators, one of the top insiders in Israel. When he says that he spoke to people in Netanyahu's inner circle, he's very well sourced in Netanyahu's inner circle. And think about that. There's going to be, you can see the campaign already. There's going to be a lot of people saying, wait a second, we were promised no more Hezbollah, we were promised no more Hamas, we were promised all these things about bringing down the regime in Iran, solving all of our problems. And look, we got nothing. Hezbollah is still there, Hamas is still there. Now, that's the way it's going to be spun. Never mind the fact that if you look at where we are, if on October 8th, 2023, someone had said to you that this is where we would be today, with Iran so weak, with Hezbollah so weak, the Syrian regime gone and not a threat at all, Hamas confined to that smaller area and so much weaker, and everything else that's happened, you'd obviously say, okay, I'll take that. And it's also true that the opposition, those who will be attacking Prime Minister Netanyahu for not achieving victory in all these areas, there's no way that they could argue that they would have made policy decisions that would have brought us closer to that victory. I mean, they would have probably surrendered when Biden whoever was calling the shots, when the Biden administration was pressuring Israel not to go into Rafah, right? And a lot of the other things that have happened, especially the degrading of Iran together with President Trump and everything that was done both in the 12-day war and now, none of that would have happened if we had, if we had one of these other jokers in Israel in power. But at the same time, an unsatisfactory outcome here threatens Prime Minister Netanyahu in the upcoming election. So what we see is that both the upcoming Israeli election and the upcoming U.S. election are causing problems. Now, here's the interesting thing. They're causing problems that kind of move in opposite directions. Because for President Trump, he wants an end to hostilities. Going back to President Trump's part of his hesitancy to go back to kinetic action, and this is what the Iranian calculation is, and this is what was said in that Jack Keane video. The Iranian calculation is that the closer we get to the elections, the less President Trump will want to engage in kinetic action because it's unpopular and because it'll spike oil prices for all the reasons. So he's looking for a non-kinetic, he's going to be increasingly looking for a non-kinetic solution as we get closer to the midterms. But for Prime Minister Netanyahu, kinetic activity, ramping up kinetic activity in Lebanon against Hamas, against Iran, is actually the road to popularity. It's what the Israeli public want. So the closer we get to the elections, the more Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to want to return to increased kinetic action. And the closer we get to the midterms, the less President Trump is going to want to move towards kinetic actions. That's the calculation here as I see it, and the impact of these two upcoming elections. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned enough in a lot of these videos, and I should talk about it more, is that on this channel, there's a playlist section where we have the Shoulder to Shoulder podcast. It's a weekly podcast that I do with Pastor Doug Reed, and we talk about a whole range of issues. It's more of a long-form conversation podcast, and this is a podcast that's been going for about 5 years every week, but up until only a couple months ago, it was audio only. So you can find all of it on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever you find podcasts. You can find the entire archive of Shoulder to Shoulder. And only recently we started uploading video to YouTube as well. Make sure to check out the Shoulder to Shoulder podcast. I think you'll enjoy it if you're enjoying this channel. And please like and share, subscribe, and tell everyone what's going on this channel. Thank you for sharing and for helping the channel grow. And please give me advice if you have some advice for me about how to do things differently, how to improve. Still learning. God bless.